The story begins on a dark night when a bright alien spaceship crashes into a lake on Earth. After the crash, the two men emerge from the spacecraft and crawl out of the lake onto the shore. Kainan, one of them, quickly checks on his friend, who has sadly died from the crash. That night, as Kainan rests, he dreams of his wife and son as he prepares for battle. Waking up to the morning sunlight, Kainan notices the ship's beacon floating in the lake. He swims to it and uses it to find his location. After that, he downloads information about Earth and its inhabitants, a process that proves to be painful for him. Once he finishes, he buries his crewmate and continues toward the forest. Armed with a powerful blaster, Kainan prepares to face the challenge that await him. Deeper in the woods, Kainan discovers the lifeless body of a whale next to a ruined and abandoned village. As he explores the village, he suddenly hears the sound of horses approaching and is quickly attacked. In the struggle, he loses his weapon in the river and is knocked unconscious. Kainan wakes up as a prisoner, captured by a Viking warrior named Wulfric. He is taken to a local village ruled by King Hrothgar, who is having a tense conversation with his daughter, Freya. They discuss her potential marriage to Wulfric, whom Hrothgar believes would make a good king with Freya by his side. However, Freya firmly declines, arguing that Wulfric would only become like his father, a tyrant and butcher. Hrothgar then presses her to choose someone else if she does not want Wulfric to be the king. Just then, Wulfric enters, prompting Freya to leave the hall. Wulfric then informs Hrothgar about the destruction of a nearby village, raising concern that Gunnar, the chieftain of that village, might blame them for the attack. Wulfric mentions he found a man in the village but does not know who he is. Hrothgar insists that they need to uncover the man's identity quickly to prevent a war from breaking out. Wulfric approaches Kainan to interrogate him, referring to him as the Outlander since he does not know his name. Kainan introduces himself, claiming he comes from an island in the north and is hunting a dragon. Wulfric, however, does not believe his story and brutally beats him before tying him up. Afterward, Wulfric goes to find Freya, asking her to tend to Kainan's injuries. Meanwhile, Kainan uses a hot iron rod to free himself just as Freya enters to treat his wounds. As she realizes he has freed himself, she shouts to alert others. In a sudden move, Kainan attacks her in an attempt to flee. At dusk, Hrothgar asks Wulfric about Kainan's progress, but Wulfric admits that Kainan refuses to cooperate. Hrothgar explains that he has sent men to reach Gunnar and insists they must clarify that they were not the ones who attacked his village. Wulfric hesitates, revealing his resentment toward Gunnar for having killed his father. Hrothgar reminds him that to be a king, he must learn to balance his emotions with logic, urging him to keep control of both his heart and mind, rather than relying solely on his sword and shield. Later that night, the village is suddenly attacked by an unseen, bright creature, and the villagers believe it to be an assault from Gunnar. They stay on high alert, watching for the enemy, while the creature picks off the men one by one, dragging their bodies beyond the wooden boundary set by the Vikings. When Kainan sees the creature, he recognizes it as the Moorwen, the dragon he mentioned earlier. He attempts to chase the Moorwen beyond the wooden walls, but Wulfric's men quickly restrain him and tie him up. In that moment, Kainan experiences a flashback to his home planet, where he remembers losing someone very dear to him. Overwhelmed with grief, he cries heartbrokenly. In the morning, a small boy named Eric tries to feed Kainan, but one of Wulfric's men quickly kicks the food away and Kainan is brought before Hrothgar, who listens to his men debate about the Moorwen. Some believe it to be the work of forest spirits, while others think it is a sign of Lucifer due to the improper burial of their last king. Hrothgar interrupts the argument and asks Kainan to share what he knows about the dragon he is hunting. Kainan explains that the Moorwen attacks people, emits a smell of death, and lures victims with its lights before killing them. He admits that he inadvertently brought the creature to the village when it boarded his ship, causing their crash. Despite Kainan's explanation, Hrothgar is skeptical of his story. Realizing they plan to hunt the Moorwen, Kainan urges Hrothgar to let him join the team to haunt Moorwen. Agreeing to his request, the Vikings decide to take Kainan with them, tying his hands and giving him a horse. Before they leave, Freya approaches and throws a punch at him, while the villagers shout at him, calling him an outlander. As they venture into the woods, Wulfric spots several corpses and suggests forming expedition groups. However, Kainan believes they should stay together to hunt the Moorwen. Despite his suggestion, Hrothgar agrees with Wulfric and splits the group into pairs, with Wulfric teamed up with Kainan. As the pairs search the woods, some find horse heads while others discover various animal corpses. Kainan and Wulfric are by a riverbank when they hear a noise from a nearby cave. The entire team gathers and confronts the creature, which turns out to be a bear. Kainan helps the group defeat it, and Hrothgar spares Kainan's life, rewarding him with a sword. After their victory, the village celebrates, and Kainan, now dressed as a Viking, enters the hall. The villagers warmly welcome him as their guest rather than an outlander. While enjoying their meal, Freya overhears the story of how Kainan saved Hrothgar from the bear. As they share their meal, Kainan and Hrothgar discover a young boy hiding under the table. Kainan offers him some food, but Hrothgar realizes the boy is curious about the sword that killed the bear. Kainan promises to lend it to him in exchange for his name, and the boy introduces himself as Eric. Hrothgar then reveals that raiders killed Eric's parents a year ago, but he reassures Kainan that the village is looking after the boy and he will be fine. As part of the festivities, Wulfric engages in a shield game and challenges Kainan to join. In the game, people hold shields against their shoulders while Wulfric and Kainan stand on top. Wulfric runs across the shields, and Kainan tries to do the same. After a while, Wulfric performs a somersault and lands perfectly on a shield several feet away. Kainan manages to replicate the feat but falls when his shield breaks in half. Nevertheless, Wulfric praises him for his effort. After the celebration, Freya approaches Kainan and thanks him for saving her father's life. As they talk, Kainan tries to warn her about the Moorwen that has been killing their people, not the giant bear. Suddenly, Gunnar arrives and attacks the village. During the fierce fight, Gunnar finds Hrothgar and disarms him, shattering his shield. Just as he prepares to kill Hrothgar, Kainan intervenes in time to save him again. Eventually, Gunnar and his men retreat, unable to fight with the villagers. Outside their boundaries, Gunnar expresses his anger over the destruction of his village and not even leaving his family's bodies behind for him to grieve over. After the fierce battle, Eric cuts his long hair to imitate Kainan, while Freya tends to Kainan's wounds. As she works, he asks her about Gunnar's identity, curious about the man who has been part of their struggle. Freya explains that their conflict with Gunnar started when his tribe failed to join a raid against the Franks, who ambushed their warriors and killed King Halga, Wulfric's father. Meanwhile, Gunnar and his men plan to defeat Hrothgar and Wulfric. He instructs his men to prepare for an attack, anticipating that Wulfric will send troops into the trees before dawn. As a group ventures into the woods, one of Gunnar's men is killed by the Moorwen. Hearing the cries, Gunnar and his men investigate but, upon seeing the glowing Moorwen, they retreat to Hrothgar's village for help. Wulfric, noticing Gunnar's team rushing back, orders his men to attack, believing it to be a trick. After they kill several of Gunnar's men, all including Gunnar, Hrothgar, Wulfric, and Kainan, witness the Moorwen brutally attacking one of Gunnar's men, and Wulfric's men finally realize that it is not a bear. Gunnar, along with Hrothgar and Wulfric's team, gathers to discuss the threats they face. One member suggests leaving the village, but Freya argues against it, stating that the land is their home. Wulfric proposes hunting down the creature, but Kainan warns that they will not be able to kill it outright. Instead, he insists that their only chance is to trap it, emphasizing its strength and the fact that it is free in the fields. Wulfric, frustrated by Kainan's advice, becomes angry and argues that Kainan is not one of them and should not interfere. Hrothgar acknowledges Wulfric's point but ultimately supports Kainan's plan to trap the Moorwen. With Kainan's guidance, the combined team starts digging a large pit at the entrance point the following day. They create a trap for the creature using wood and whale oil. Once the hole is deep enough, they set up several posts and place shields on top of them. Afterward, they pour barrels of whale oil into the pit. By evening, the trap is ready, and the villagers gather to share their excitement and hope for successfully defending themselves against the Moorwen. Once everything is ready, Hrothgar approaches Kainan and offers him a position in the village, inviting him to become one of their own. Meanwhile, one of the victims from the previous night regains consciousness, surrounded by corpses, only to be killed again by the Moorwen. Later, in Kainan's hut, Freya is seen preparing a meal for him. As they share their food, Kainan reveals that his father urged him to stay, but Kainan expresses his desire to leave. Freya shares her father's hopes for Kainan to remain, but Kainan insists she does not understand what kind of man he truly is. In response, Freya encourages him to share his story, seeking to understand him better. Kainan reveals his story, saying that his men were no different from the Vikings, driven by a desire for land. When they spotted an island, they seized it without knowing who it belonged to. He explains that the island was home to millions of Moorwens, but in their quest for territory, they killed them with fire, leaving the rest haunted. He feels guilty for having contributed to their suffering. As part of his reward, Kainan was given a place for his family to live on that land. He cherished the time he spent with them until he was called away on a new mission. Before he leaves, he assures his family that they were safe since all the Moorwens had been eliminated. However, 3 weeks later, he learned that one Moorwen had survived and had killed everyone, including his wife and son. To this day, he believes he is to blame for their deaths. Freya tries to console him, suggesting that it was their destiny, but Kainan does not believe in destiny. In a meaningful gesture, Freya hands him the king's sword, a family heirloom passed down from her father, now entrusted to him. After their conversation, Kainan receives an arrow to prepare for the battle against the Moorwen. The group gets ready for the trap, now with Gunnar's assistance. The warriors open the village doors, and Wulfric and Kainan step outside as bait, waiting for the beast to emerge from the darkness. They cautiously approach the woods while the warriors remain hidden, ready to spring into action. As they draw closer, Kainan catches the scent of the Moorwen and devises a clever plan. He throws a flame into the woods, revealing that the Moorwen is lurking nearby. As the creature slowly approaches, the village priest steps forward, chanting for the devil, Lucifer, to leave, but he is instantly attacked and killed by the enormous beast. Wulfric and Kainan then dash toward the gate to capture the Moorwen, but in the chaos, Wulfric falls into the trap along with the creature. Kainan quickly helps him out, saving him from a dangerous fate. The warriors unleash fire arrows at the trap, resulting in a massive explosion. Initially believing they have destroyed the Moorwen, they are caught off guard when another Moorwen appears behind the women watching from a distance. Eric warns Freya about the monster lurking behind them, causing panic as the women rush outside. However, Freya stands her ground, resolute in her decision to confront the creature. Hearing the women's cries, all the soldiers rush to their aid, joined by Hrothgar. Suddenly, the first Moorwen emerges from the flames. Wulfric and Kainan decide to confront the creature together, but they quickly realize they are no match for its power. Gunnar steps in to help, but in an instant, the Moorwen executes him before fleeing into the shadows. Eric approaches Kainan and warns him about another Moorwen inside. As Kainan rushes to investigate, he discovers Hrothgar taking his last breaths in Freya's lap, with the Moorwen having already escaped. The next morning, Kainan notices the villagers leaving the settlement, and Eric approaches him, expressing the same concern. Kainan tells him that the village is no longer safe and insists that he should leave with the others. However, Eric is determined to stay by Kainan's side. Kainan tries to reason with him, explaining that once the danger passes, the village will be safe again, and everyone will return, including Eric. With a heavy heart, Kainan lifts Eric onto a cart, urging him to go for his safety and be with the villagers as they leave the village. Afterward, Kainan approaches Wulfric, who is feeling discouraged from the recent events and doubts his worthiness to lead. Kainan encourages him, emphasizing that they must unite to fight the Moorwen and create a safer village for their people. Together, they gather a small group of men to investigate the common well, where they discover blood. Although the plan seems reckless, it is their best chance to locate the Moorwen's hideout. Kainan asks Boromir, a skilled warrior, for stronger weapons made from better materials for their mission. As they prepare to head to the shore, Freya insists on joining them, driven by her desire for revenge against the Moorwen that destroyed her family. Kainan agrees, and the trio sets off to the lake where his ship crashed, hoping to salvage some metal for their fight. In the lake, Kainan dives into the water to grab the metal when he suddenly feels something lurking behind him. After retrieving a piece of metal, he emerges from the wreckage of his ship. He discovers a piece of clothing that belongs to Freya, prompting him to rush back to the surface. Once he breaks through the water, he finds Wulfric unconscious on the boat and realizes Freya is missing. They quickly return to the village, where Kainan hands the metal to Boromir for weapon preparation. In no time, Boromir crafts a sturdy weapon and presents it to Kainan. Later, Kainan, along with Wulfric and their men, descends into the common well, discovering an alternate passage. Once everyone arrives, they begin to investigate further, determined to uncover what lies ahead. Meanwhile, Freya comes to her senses, finding herself surrounded by a pile of dead bodies. The shocking sight fills her with panic, and she starts to scream in fear. As she tries to calm herself and think of a way to escape, she spots a small Moorwen feasting on one of the corpses. Frightened, she begins to shout again, which draws the creature's attention. This results in the Moorwen launching an attack on Freya. Back with Kainan and Wulfric's team, Wulfric accidentally kicks a small stone, catching the attention of the Moorwen that was about to attack Freya. The creature abandons Freya and turns its focus on the team. Soon, one of their members is attacked by the Moorwen, but they press on, only to find the creature feasting on the man it captured. Boromir bravely charges at the small Moorwen, sacrificing himself in the process. Though he loses his life, he manages to injure the creature's eyes, leaving it blind. After some time, Wulfric and Kainan successfully locate Freya and manage to kill the small Moorwen. This event awakens the giant Moorwen, which realizes its offspring is dead. As the team tries to escape the enormous creature, they find themselves at the edge of a waterfall. Wulfric stands guard to protect them while Kainan and Freya attempt to climb the slippery rock face. However, Wulfric is soon injured by the Moorwen, prompting Kainan to confront the creature. In an intense battle, Kainan fights the Moorwen until Freya joins him. Together, they manage to push the Moorwen over the edge of the cliff, sending it to its demise. Afterward, Freya and Kainan return to Wulfric, where he passes the kingship to Kainan just before taking his last breath. The duo climbs to the top of a cliff and spots villagers traveling below. They call out to Eric, signaling him to return to their village. Kainan tells Freya to wait for the others and shares a tender kiss with her before heading back to the lake. There, he says a heartfelt goodbye to his wife's submerged coffin. Unbeknownst to him, Freya watches from a distance as a spaceship approaches to take Kainan away. In a moment of determination, Kainan destroys the beacon, choosing to stay on Earth with Freya instead. He then goes back to the village, puts the kingship handed over by Wulfric, and pays his respects to the fallen Hrothgar and Wulfric with a Viking farewell. Finally, Kainan marries Freya and embraces Eric as his son, ready to build a new life together.